A flash of white light ripples across a black ocean. For an instant, towering platforms emerge from the darkness, suspended above endless waves. Then the storm swallows them again. Rain rattles against transparent steel windows. Far below, seawater crashes against immense support pylons that disappear into depths no visitor has ever measured. Inside vast chambers illuminated by pale blue glow panels, rows of transparent cylinders stretch farther than the eye can comfortably follow. Within them drift thousands upon thousands of children who all possess the same face. Their eyes remain closed. Their futures have already been decided. You are falling asleep to the complete history of the clone army, one of the most remarkable and tragic stories in the Star Wars galaxy. This is a tale of secret plans, hidden masters, engineered soldiers, and a war that transformed the Republic into an empire. The story unfolds slowly tonight, carried by rainstorms over Camino, by the distant hum of starship engines, and by questions that still linger decades after the Clone Wars ended. If you have traveled with these stories before, quietly note which night of the journey this is for you. If this is your first visit, let it be night one. As the thunder rolls across the oceans of Camino, we begin where the mystery truly starts. How does an army large enough to fight a galactic war appear almost overnight? That question sits at the heart of the Clone Army's history, because when the Galactic Republic first discovered the clones in 22 BBY, the soldiers were already trained, equipped, and prepared for battle. The army had not been assembled over months. It had been growing in secret for nearly a decade. Senators on Coruscant did not know about it. Most Jedi did not know about it. Even the Supreme Chancellor, who publicly led the Republic, appeared, at least on the surface, to be learning of the army at the same moment as everyone else. Yet hidden beneath those appearances was one of the most successful conspiracies in galactic history. To understand the beginning, you must first travel back to the final years before the Clone Wars. The Galactic Republic still governed much of the known galaxy, but its institutions were weakening. Corruption spread through the Senate. Corporate alliances accumulated enormous influence. Entire sectors felt neglected by distant politicians on Coruscant. During these years, a respected Jedi master named Sifo Dyas became increasingly troubled by what he sensed through the Force. Canon sources established that he foresaw a coming conflict large enough to threaten the Republic itself. While many members of the Jedi Council viewed such warnings with caution, Sifo Dyas believed preparation was necessary. He saw a storm approaching long before anyone else recognized the clouds. The mystery deepens because Sifo Dyas died years before the Clone Wars began. According to canon accounts explored in the Clone Wars, he commissioned the creation of a grand army for the Republic before his death. Yet the exact chain of events remained hidden for years. The project was launched through channels so secret that even the Jedi Order eventually lost track of it. The army continued growing after its founder was gone. Funding continued, construction continued. Genetic material was secured. Entire cities devoted themselves to the project. Somehow the machine kept moving long after the man who started it had disappeared from the galaxy. Far from the core worlds, beyond many commonly traveled hyperspace routes, lay Camino. Before Obi-Wan Kenobi's investigation and Attack of the Clones, Camino was absent from the Jedi archives, deliberately erased from available records. The planet itself seemed designed for secrecy. Endless oceans covered its surface. Permanent storms rolled across the horizon. Massive cities stood atop stilts above the sea. The Kaminoans who inhabited these settlements possessed long necks, pale skin, and a reputation for unmatched expertise in cloning technology. Across the galaxy, cloning existed in various forms, but Kamino's achievements stood apart from nearly every known example. When Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi arrived at Tipoca City in 22 BBY, Prime Minister Lama Su greeted him as though his visit had been expected. The moment remains one of the most fascinating scenes in Star Wars lore because Obi-Wan believed he was investigating an assassination attempt, while the Kaminoans assumed he had come to inspect the Republic's clone army. Neither side initially understood the confusion. Lama Su calmly explained that nearly 200,000 units were ready, with another million in production. Obi-Wan had never heard of such an army. Yet the Kaminoans spoke as though the arrangement had existed for years. In that instant, the Jedi stumbled into a secret older than many Padawans serving in the Order. Wait, who selected the face that would be copied millions of times? The answer leads directly to one of the galaxy's most feared bounty hunters. Jango Fett was recruited as the genetic template for the entire project. Canon establishes that he agreed in exchange for substantial payment and one special condition. He requested an unaltered clone for himself, a child who would not experience accelerated aging or behavioral modifications. That child became Boba Fett. While millions of clones would age twice as fast as ordinary humans and spend their lives preparing for war, Boba would grow naturally beside the father whose face he shared. The contrast between Boba's life and the lives of the clone troopers would eventually become one of the most striking consequences of the Kaminoan project. Jango Fett brought more than genetic material. He brought a reputation. By the final years of the Republic, he was regarded as one of the most dangerous combatants in the galaxy. His Mandalorian armor, twin Westar 34 blaster pistols, and relentless efficiency made him a valuable template for a military force. The Kaminoans admired consistency and reliability. They wanted soldiers who could operate under pressure, follow orders, and survive hostile conditions. Jango represented those qualities. Yet even here, an intriguing contradiction appears. The clones inherited the face and abilities of one man, but over time many developed personalities remarkably different from their original source. The deeper Obi-Wan investigated, the stranger the story became. He discovered Jango Fett living openly on Kamino. He learned that Fett claimed he had been recruited by a man named Tyrannus. Viewers later learned that Tyrannus was Count Dooku, the former Jedi who had become Darth Tyrannus, apprentice to Darth Sidious. This revelation transformed the clone army from a political mystery into a Sith conspiracy. The same forces preparing the separatist movement were connected to the army that would oppose it. The war had enemies on both sides, but increasingly it appeared that one hidden hand was arranging the entire board. Darth Sidious, known publicly as Chancellor Palpatine of Naboo, occupied the center of that board. Throughout the prequel era, he carefully positioned events to increase his own power. Separatist worlds broke away from the Republic. The Senate became frightened. Military solutions gained support. Meanwhile, an army waited in secret, ready to appear precisely when the Republic became desperate enough to accept it. The brilliance of the plan lay not only in creating soldiers, but in creating circumstances that made those soldiers seem necessary. When the Republic finally embraced the clone army, most citizens believed salvation had arrived. Yet the clones themselves knew none of this. As storms battered Kamino's oceans and lightning illuminated the towers of Tipoca City, countless children moved through training facilities beneath the sea-gray sky. They studied tactics. They learned discipline. They practiced marksmanship. Their instructors prepared them for battlefields they had never seen. They did not know the names Sidious or Tyrannus. They did not understand the political tensions spreading through the Republic. Most had never walked beneath a clear sky. Their entire universe consisted of training halls, barracks, laboratories, and the constant sound of rain against metal structures. And perhaps that is the quiet tragedy already forming at the beginning of their story. Long before the Battle of Geonosis, before Venator-class star destroyers crossed the galaxy, before the famous victories and betrayals of the Clone Wars, millions of lives were being shaped toward a single purpose. The Kaminoans viewed them as products. Politicians would eventually view them as military assets. Generals would rely upon them. Historians would remember them as the army that saved the Republic. But in these early years, beneath the storms of Kamino, they were simply children growing in a city above an endless ocean, unaware that the fate of the galaxy had already been placed upon their shoulders. Why did identical men become individuals? It is one of the most fascinating questions in the entire history of the clone army. The Kaminoans expected consistency. They engineered millions of soldiers from the DNA of a single template. Growth acceleration ensured the clones matured at roughly twice the normal human rate. Genetic modifications reduced traits the Kaminoans considered undesirable and emphasized obedience, discipline, and combat effectiveness. Yet, as the years passed, something emerged that no laboratory could fully control. Beneath identical faces, distinct personalities began to form. Life on Kamino was structured with extraordinary precision. Clone cadets woke according to strict schedules, trained in carefully monitored facilities, and advanced through standardized programs designed to prepare them for military service. Every stage of development was observed. Every weakness was cataloged. Every skill was measured. In the animated series, The Clone Wars, viewers see young cadets running obstacle courses, practicing combat drills, and studying battlefield tactics long before they ever leave their homeworld. The Kaminoans believed efficiency could be engineered. What they discovered instead was that experience shapes people even when genetics remain the same. The accelerated aging process defined every aspect of clone life. A clone physically reached adulthood in approximately half the time required by a normal human. While a child on Coruscant might spend years exploring possibilities, clone cadets moved rapidly toward a predetermined future. Their lives were compressed. Childhood disappeared quickly. By the time the Clone Wars began in 22 BBY, many soldiers entering combat had spent their entire existence preparing for battles they did not fully understand. The Republic saw ready-made troops. The clones experienced a lifetime that seemed to rush forward like a starship entering hyperspace. How do you create loyalty before a soldier has ever met the nation he serves? Kamino's answer was education. From their earliest days, clones were taught that they existed to defend the Galactic Republic. They studied military history, they learned command structures, they practiced teamwork above all else. Individual glory mattered less than unit success. Failure by one soldier could endanger an entire squad. Success depended on trust, coordination, and sacrifice. These lessons became deeply ingrained long before the clones ever encountered the Jedi they would eventually follow into battle. The facilities of Tipoca City reflected this philosophy. Vast training halls stretched beneath curved white architecture. Simulated combat environments allowed cadets to experience battlefield conditions. Firing ranges echoed with blaster fire. Tactical classrooms displayed maps of worlds the trainees had never visited. Outside, the storms never seemed to stop. Rain drummed against transparent steel day and night. For many clones, those storms became the soundtrack of childhood. Years later, veterans would remember Camino not as a birthplace filled with warmth, but as a world of cold oceans, white corridors, and endless preparation. Among the most important developments in clone history was the emergence of specialized units. Not every clone followed exactly the same path. Certain soldiers demonstrated exceptional initiative, leadership, or combat skill. These individuals entered advanced programs that produced elite forces. ARC troopers, short for Advanced Recon Commandos, became some of the Republic's most capable warriors. Clone commandos received highly specialized training for infiltration and unconventional missions. Pilots mastered starfighter operations. Medics learned battlefield medicine. The clone army grew increasingly complex, becoming far more than a collection of identical infantrymen. Yet even among ordinary cadets, differences became impossible to ignore. Some were natural leaders, others excelled at technology, strategy, or marksmanship. Certain clones developed senses of humor, others became quiet and reflective. The Kaminoans noticed these variations, but often regarded them as inefficiencies. To the clones themselves, however, individuality became a source of identity. Nicknames began to appear, personal friendships formed, small differences in behavior evolved into distinct personalities. The army was becoming something far more human than its creators intended. Why did Domino Squad struggle when so many others succeeded? The answer reveals much about what made the clones unique. In the Clone Wars episode Clone Cadets, viewers meet Heavy, Echo, Fives, Droid Bait, and Cut Up during their training on Camino. Unlike top-performing squads, Domino Squad repeatedly fails evaluations. Their coordination breaks down, their instructors lose patience, they appear destined for separation or reassignment. Yet their weakness does not stem from lack of skill. It stems from a failure to trust one another as a team. Their instructor, the Mandalorian training sergeant Brick, sees little promise in them. The Kaminoan administrator Town Wee questions whether the squad should even remain together. Time after time, Domino Squad falls short of expectations, but the failures force them to learn something deeper than procedure. They begin understanding one another's strengths. They start communicating honestly. Instead of functioning as identical soldiers following identical routines, they become brothers who rely on one another. The transformation is subtle at first. Then everything changes. When Domino Squad finally completes the infamous Citadel Challenge, the victory feels larger than a simple training exercise. Heavy's determination, Echo's precision, Fives' adaptability, Cut-Up's humor and Droid Bait's loyalty combine into something greater than any individual contribution. Their success becomes one of the earliest examples of a theme that echoes throughout clone history. The strongest clone units are rarely the most obedient. They are the ones that build genuine trust. Again and again during the Clone Wars, survival depends not merely on following orders, but on understanding the soldiers standing beside you. Another important development occurred through armor customization. Early clone armor remained almost completely uniform. Phase 1 armor, introduced before the Battle of Geonosis, reflected Kamino's preference for standardization. White armor symbolized a collective identity. Yet clones gradually began adding colored markings, symbols, and personal modifications. What started as practical battlefield identification evolved into self-expression. Different battalions developed distinctive appearances. Commanders became recognizable at a glance. Individual soldiers found ways to leave their mark on equipment designed to make everyone look the same. The existence of these personal identities presents a remarkable contradiction. The Republic purchased the clone army because it offered predictability. Senators believed standardized troops would be easier to manage than millions of independent recruits. The Kaminoans promised reliability. Military planners expected consistency. Instead, the Republic received an army whose greatest strength often came from individuality. Captain Rex would become different from Commander Cody. Fives would become different from Echo. Thousands of soldiers sharing the same face would develop entirely different ways of viewing the galaxy. Beneath all these developments, another process continued unseen. Deep inside every clone rested a biological safeguard implanted during development. The Kaminoans described it as part of standard procedures. Most clones never questioned its existence because they did not know it was there. The chips remained dormant throughout training and early service. They caused no visible problems. They attracted little attention. Yet hidden within those tiny implants was a command that would one day alter the fate of the Jedi Order, the Republic, and the entire galaxy. For now, however, that future remains distant. Rain still falls across Kamino's oceans. Young cadets race through training corridors. Instructors shout orders across firing ranges. The glow of computer displays reflects from polished white walls. Domino Squad celebrates a hard-earned victory. Millions of clones continue preparing for a war they do not yet know is coming. And somewhere beyond the storms, beyond the Republic, beyond even the awareness of the Jedi Council, forces are quietly arranging the conflict that will soon bring these soldiers out of the shadows and onto the battlefields of history. Did the clones save the Republic at Geonosis? Or did they unknowingly begin its destruction? The question hangs over every account of the Battle of Geonosis because this was the moment the clone army stepped out of secrecy and into galactic history. For nearly a decade, soldiers had been growing and training on Kamino. Then, in the span of a few dramatic days in 22 BBY, the Republic discovered them, accepted them, and immediately deployed them into the largest conflict seen in generations. The speed of that transition remains astonishing. One day there was no Republic army. The next day, an army of hundreds of thousands was descending onto a battlefield. The crisis began when Obi-Wan Kenobi followed a trail that led him from Kamino to Geonosis. There he discovered evidence of a vast separatist alliance. Count Dooku had gathered representatives from the Trade Federation, the Techno Union, the Commerce Guild, and other powerful organizations that were preparing for war. Massive droid foundries operated beneath the planet's rocky surface. Battle droids marched in endless ranks. Factories produced weapons on an industrial scale. Geonosis was not merely a world sympathetic to the separatists, it was becoming the military heart of the Confederacy of Independent Systems. When Obi-Wan transmitted his findings, the Republic faced an impossible situation. The Senate had debated military creation acts for years without reaching consensus. The Jedi Order served as peacekeepers, not generals. Yet now evidence suggested that a hostile power was preparing to unleash a massive army across the galaxy. Before a political solution could emerge, events accelerated. Obi-Wan was captured. Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala traveled to Geonosis in an attempt to rescue him. They were captured as well. Suddenly, three of the Republic's most important figures awaited execution inside a separatist arena. The execution arena on Geonosis remains one of the defining images of the era. Thousands of Geonosians filled the stands. Count Dooku watched from above. Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme were chained to pillars in the center of the arena. Massive creatures were released against them. The reek charged through dust and stone. The Nexu stalked with predatory patience. The Acklay crashed forward like a living siege weapon even before the battle officially began. The Republic stood on the edge of catastrophe. Had those prisoners died that day, galactic history would have unfolded very differently. What happened next demonstrated both the strength and vulnerability of the Jedi Order. Approximately 200 Jedi, led by Mace Windu, entered the arena to rescue the captives. For a brief moment, it seemed the Jedi had seized control of the situation. Lightsabers ignited throughout the arena. Blue, green, and purple blades flashed through clouds of dust. Battle droids fell in large numbers. Yet victory quickly slipped away. The Jedi found themselves surrounded by overwhelming forces. Thousands of droids closed in from every direction. Many Jedi died within minutes. The Order had not fought a war in generations, and now it faced the reality of modern battlefield combat. Then the sky changed. The thunder of engines rolled across Geonosis as Republic assault ships descended from orbit. Acclamator-class assault transports emerged through the atmosphere, carrying the army hidden for so many years on Kamino. Their arrival transformed the battle instantly. LAAT gunships swept across the arena. Clone troopers in white Phase 1 armor deployed in disciplined formations. Heavy weapons opened fire. Precision replaced chaos. For the trapped Jedi, rescue had arrived at the last possible moment. For the galaxy, a new age had begun. The first generation of clone troopers entered combat with remarkable effectiveness. They had never experienced a real battlefield before Geonosis, yet years of preparation became visible almost immediately. Squads coordinated movements with practiced efficiency. Officers communicated across rapidly changing fronts. Specialized units adapted to unfamiliar conditions. Clone pilots guided gunships through hostile fire. Infantry pushed forward against numerically superior droid forces. The Kaminoans had promised soldiers designed for war. Geonosis became the first proof that their claims were not exaggerated. Yet victory carried a cost. The The Clone Wars television series would later show countless battles across the galaxy, but Geonosis established a pattern that continued throughout the conflict. Clones died in large numbers, entire formations vanished during assaults, gunships exploded under enemy fire, vehicles burned across desert landscapes. The Republic gained an army, but it also gained a steady stream of casualties. For the first time in generations, citizens of the Republic had to confront the realities of a galactic war. The conflict would not be quick. It would not be clean. One of the most important moments of the battle occurred far from the arena. In the Petranaki region, Mace Windu confronted Jango Fett directly. Fett had survived countless dangerous encounters throughout his career, but on Geonosis his path crossed that of one of the Jedi Order's greatest warriors. The duel was brief and decisive. Windu's purple lightsaber struck, and Jango Fett died on the battlefield that day. Nearby stood his son, Boba Fett, still a child. In a single moment, the genetic template of the clone army was gone, while millions of his copies continued fighting across the galaxy. The battle expanded beyond individual duels. Republic armor advanced across Geonosian terrain. TTE walkers exchanged fire with separatist forces. Gunships maneuvered through swarms of enemy fighters. Count Dooku eventually escaped the battlefield, carrying crucial plans and knowledge with him. Although the Republic could claim victory, its primary enemy survived. The war therefore continued. What many hoped would be a single, decisive engagement instead became the opening chapter of a conflict lasting 3 brutal years. Why did the Republic accept the clone army so quickly? This question becomes more intriguing the longer you consider it. Senators debated countless issues for months or years, yet an army of genetically engineered soldiers suddenly appeared and received immediate authorization. Fear played a major role. The separatist threat was real. Geonosis had proven that. The Republic needed defenders, and the clones were ready. But Palpatine's influence also mattered. As Chancellor, he gained emergency powers during this period. Each new crisis increased dependence on strong central leadership. The clone army did not merely protect the Republic. It strengthened the political conditions that would eventually allow the Republic to become an empire. For the clones themselves, however, politics remained distant. Most soldiers cared little about Senate procedures or constitutional debates. Their world consisted of missions, commanders, objectives, and brothers standing beside them. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. Now they were finally doing what they had been created to do. The war that had existed only in simulations and lessons suddenly became real. The smell of blaster fire filled the air, dust-coated armor plates. Casualty reports arrived faster than replacements could be deployed. The Clone Wars had begun. As Republic fleets departed Geonosis, carrying wounded soldiers and exhausted Jedi toward future campaigns, the galaxy crossed a threshold from which it could not return. Venator-class Star Destroyers would soon dominate hyperspace lanes. Entire worlds would become battlefields. Clone legions would earn legendary reputations. New heroes would emerge. New tragedies would follow. And beneath all the victories celebrated by the Republic, the deeper purpose of the war remained hidden, known only to Darth Sidious and the small circle of conspirators who understood that the conflict was never truly meant to be won by either side. Why did an army designed for obedience become one of the most individualistic military forces in galactic history. The question becomes impossible to ignore once the Clone Wars spread across the galaxy. On paper, the Grand Army of the Republic appeared perfectly standardized. Its soldiers shared the same genetic template. They wore nearly identical armor. They trained under the same system. Yet as the war expanded from Geonosis to hundreds of worlds, the clones developed unique cultures, traditions, and identities that no military planner had anticipated. The longer they fought, the more distinct they became. The Clone Wars quickly transformed into a conflict fought across thousands of star systems. Republic fleets moved constantly through hyperspace lanes. Venator-class star destroyers became familiar sights above contested worlds. These warships combined the functions of carrier, battleship, troop transport, and command center. Their immense hangars housed squadrons of V-19 Torrents, ARC-170 starfighters, and later V-Wing starfighters. Clone officers coordinated campaigns from bridge stations illuminated by tactical displays. Below them stretched a galaxy increasingly consumed by war. One of the earliest major campaigns occurred on Christophsis. The crystal-covered world became the site of fierce battles between Republic and Separatist forces. It was here that many viewers first met Captain Rex and Commander Cody fighting alongside Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi during the Clone Wars. The campaign demonstrated how effectively clones could adapt under pressure. Droid armies often possessed numerical superiority, yet clone units repeatedly found ways to exploit terrain, timing, and coordination. Their battlefield flexibility surprised enemies who expected predictable behavior from genetically engineered soldiers. Captain Rex emerged as one of the clearest examples of clone individuality. Serving within the famed 501st Legion under Anakin Skywalker, Rex balanced discipline with independent judgment. He followed orders, but he also questioned them when circumstances demanded. His customized blue-marked armor distinguished him from ordinary troopers. More importantly, his decisions distinguished him. Again and again, Rex demonstrated that effective leadership required understanding the soldiers under his command rather than treating them as interchangeable parts. In many ways, he became the model for what the clone army was slowly becoming. Commander Cody represented a different style of leadership. As commander of the 212th Attack Battalion under Obi-Wan Kenobi, Cody embodied professionalism and reliability. Where Anakin often embraced risk, Obi-Wan favored careful planning. Cody adapted naturally to that approach. His troops became known for discipline, efficiency, and battlefield competence. The friendship between Cody and Obi-Wan grew over years of shared campaigns. That relationship would eventually make later events all the more tragic. But during the height of the war, it reflected the trust that increasingly developed between Jedi and clones. How did the Jedi come to view the clones they commanded? The answer varied from one Jedi to another. Some initially treated the clones as military assets. Others quickly recognized them as individuals. Jedi such as Plo Koon developed particularly strong bonds with their troops. Plo Koon's interactions with the Wolf Pack under Commander Wolf revealed a deep respect that went beyond formal command structures. He openly stated that clone lives mattered. To the soldiers serving under him, those words carried enormous significance. Many clones spent their entire lives being treated as property. A Jedi acknowledging their humanity could leave a lasting impression. The campaign on Ryloth demonstrated how complex the war had become. The Twi'lek homeworld suffered under separatist occupation, prompting a major Republic offensive. Clone pilots fought dangerous space battles above the planet while ground forces advanced through hostile territory below. The campaign required cooperation between local resistance fighters, Jedi commanders, and clone units. Victory was eventually achieved, but not without sacrifice. Like many Clone Wars operations, Ryloth revealed that liberation and destruction often arrived together. Worlds were saved, yet countless lives were lost in the process. Another campaign exposed the darker realities of military command. The Battle of Umbra remains one of the most unsettling arcs in the Clone Wars. After Anakin Skywalker was reassigned, clone forces came under the command of Jedi General Pong Krell. Unlike many Jedi, Krell viewed clone troopers as expendable resources rather than individuals. His decisions resulted in catastrophic casualties. He ordered reckless assaults. He dismissed concerns from experienced officers. Eventually, clones such as Rex, Fives, Jesse, and Hardcase realized something was deeply wrong. The crisis forced them to choose between blind obedience and moral responsibility. The significance of Umbra extends far beyond a single battle. For perhaps the first time on a large scale, clone troopers openly confronted the possibility that orders could be wrong. The Kaminoans had engineered obedience. Military training reinforced chain of command. Yet the clones on Umbra discovered that unquestioning compliance could lead directly to disaster. Their eventual resistance to Krell's actions demonstrated independent judgment at the highest level. Ironically, the soldiers created to follow orders proved more capable of moral reasoning than the Jedi general commanding them. Why did armor markings become so important? The answer lies in identity. As the war continued, clone units increasingly customized their appearance. The blue markings of the 501st became instantly recognizable. The orange patterns of the 212th reflected Cody's command. The Wolf Pack adopted distinctive gray designs. Personal symbols appeared on helmets. Armor accumulated scars from previous campaigns. What began as practical identification evolved into something more meaningful. Each mark represented experiences, friendships, victories, and losses that belonged to a specific soldier, rather than to the clone army as a whole. The transition from Phase 1 to Phase 2 clone armor further reinforced this evolution. Introduced later in the war, Phase 2 armor offered improved comfort, flexibility, and battlefield effectiveness. Its design also moved closer to the Stormtrooper armor that would eventually dominate the Imperial era. For many clones, however, the upgrade represented another opportunity for self-expression. Additional modifications appeared. Equipment varied according to specialization. Individual preferences shaped appearance. The Republic still saw legions. The clones increasingly saw themselves. Across worlds such as Felucia, Seleucami, Kashyyyk, and Anaxes, the same pattern repeated. Clone soldiers forged identities through shared experiences. Friendships deepened into brotherhood. Nicknames became more meaningful than serial numbers. Troopers remembered fallen comrades and honored their sacrifices. Entire units developed reputations that extended across the galaxy. Citizens began recognizing famous clone formations, much as they recognized Jedi heroes. The army had become something no one initially expected, a community. Yet beneath every victory, another reality persisted. Every clone knew that replacement troops continued growing on Kamino. Every casualty report reminded soldiers of their own mortality. Their accelerated aging guaranteed shorter lives even if they survived the war. The Republic celebrated their heroism, but few citizens truly understood the cost. While senators debated strategy on Coruscant, clone troopers carried the burden of the conflict one battlefield at a time. They fought for worlds they had never seen before the war. They defended a government many had never visited. And somewhere within the ranks served a soldier named Fives, whose experiences on Kamino, on the Rishi Moon outpost, and across countless campaigns were gradually preparing him for a discovery that would shake the foundations of everything the clone army believed about itself. The war still seems straightforward from a distance. Republic against separatists, clones against droids, heroes against enemies. But hidden beneath that simple picture was a secret embedded within the clones themselves, waiting for the moment when one soldier would finally begin asking questions that no one wanted answered. Was Fives the closest anyone ever came to preventing the fall of the Republic? Few questions in Star Wars lore carry greater weight. The Clone Wars are often remembered through famous battles, legendary Jedi, and dramatic victories. Yet one of the most important moments occurred far from the front lines. It involved no massive fleet engagement. No army advanced across a battlefield. Instead, the fate of the Republic began to hinge upon a single clone trooper who noticed that something did not make sense. In a galaxy filled with generals, senators, and Force users, it was an ordinary soldier who came closest to uncovering the greatest conspiracy of all. The story began with a clone trooper named Tup. During the later years of the Clone Wars, Tup served alongside the 501st and participated in campaigns across the galaxy. By all appearances, he was a loyal and capable soldier. Then, during a mission on the planet Ringo Vinda, something went terribly wrong. Without warning, Tup turned his weapon on Jedi Master Tippler and killed her. The act shocked everyone present. Jedi and clones alike struggled to understand what had happened. Nothing in Tup's behavior had suggested he was capable of such an action. The incident immediately raised disturbing questions. Clone troopers had fought beside Jedi commanders for years. Friendships had formed. Trust had developed through countless battles. While disagreements occasionally occurred, outright attacks against Jedi were virtually unheard of. Yet here stood undeniable evidence. Tup had killed a Jedi without provocation. More troubling still, he appeared confused and distressed afterward. Witnesses described behavior that seemed disconnected from his normal personality. Something deeper than simple disobedience appeared to be involved. Medical examination soon revealed an abnormality. Doctors discovered a mysterious organic implant inside Tup's brain. The Kaminoans moved quickly to explain the finding. They claimed the implant was a behavioral modification biochip, part of a standard system designed to ensure clone stability. According to their official explanation, Tup's chip had malfunctioned. The story appeared plausible. After all, the clones had been genetically engineered from birth. Additional biological safeguards did not seem impossible, yet some individuals remained unconvinced, and among them was ARC Trooper Fives. Fives had already survived experiences that shaped his character in unusual ways. He had defended the Rishi Moon outpost against separatist infiltration. He had fought on Camino during a major assault by General Grievous's forces. He had endured the horrors of Umbara and witnessed the consequences of blind obedience. These experiences left him more willing than most clones to question official explanations. Where others accepted the Kaminoan statements, Fives continued investigating. His instincts told him that Toop's death and the mysterious chip were connected to something far larger. The investigation eventually brought Fives back to Camino itself. There, he discovered evidence that the chips existed not only in Toop, but in every clone trooper. Millions of soldiers carried identical implants. The revelation transformed the situation completely. This was not an isolated medical defect affecting one individual. It was a deliberate component of the entire cloning program. The Kaminoans insisted the chips existed to suppress aggressive behavior and ensure stability, yet the secrecy surrounding them created growing suspicion. If the chips were harmless, why had no one been informed about them? As Fives dug deeper, resistance intensified. The Kaminoans became increasingly defensive. High-ranking officials attempted to control the investigation. More significantly, Chancellor Palpatine himself took an interest in the case. From the perspective of the Republic, this involvement appeared reasonable. A potential flaw affecting the clone army represented a major security concern. From the audience's perspective, however, the situation carried a chilling implication. The man secretly responsible for the conspiracy was now helping manage the investigation into that same conspiracy. Why did every path lead back toward Palpatine? Fives slowly began noticing connections that others overlooked. Witnesses disappeared. Information became difficult to access. Certain individuals seemed determined to redirect attention away from the chip's true purpose. The closer he moved toward the truth, the more dangerous his position became. Yet he continued pressing forward. What makes Fives remarkable is not that he possessed special abilities. He was not a Jedi. He could not sense disturbances in the Force. He simply followed evidence wherever it led. Eventually, fragments of the larger picture emerged. The chips were not ordinary behavioral regulators. They were designed to execute a specific command. The clones themselves had never been informed of its existence. The Jedi knew nothing about it. The Republic Senate remained unaware. Somewhere within the military structure existed a hidden contingency capable of overriding the free will of millions of soldiers. Fives did not yet understand every detail, but he understood enough to realize that the entire Republic was in danger. His desperate attempt to expose the truth led him to Coruscant. There, surrounded by the glittering towers of the galactic capital, Fives raced against time. The irony is striking. While fleets battled across distant sectors, one clone trooper was trying to prevent a disaster unfolding at the center of the Republic itself. He sought meetings with key figures. He attempted to warn Jedi leaders. He tried to explain what he had learned, yet the conspiracy's architects remained several steps ahead. Information became distorted. Motives were questioned. Trust eroded. One of the most heartbreaking scenes in clone history followed. Fives managed to speak with Captain Rex and Anakin Skywalker, two individuals who genuinely cared about him. During this conversation, he revealed fragments of the truth. He explained the existence of the chips. He described his fears regarding a hidden plot. He insisted that something catastrophic was coming. Yet by this stage, circumstances made his claims difficult to verify. The pressure placed upon him, combined with deliberate manipulation by Palpatine's agents, left him appearing unstable to many observers. Then came the tragedy. Before Fives could fully reveal what he knew, he was killed during an encounter with Republic security forces. His death silenced the only clone who had come dangerously close to exposing the entire plan. The information died with him, surviving only as incomplete fragments in the memories of those who had listened. Rex remembered. Anakin remembered. But neither possessed enough evidence to understand the full scope of the threat. The Republic moved forward. The war continued. The hidden mechanism remained intact. Looking back, it is difficult not to wonder how much depended on those final conversations. Had Fives succeeded in presenting undeniable proof, history could have changed dramatically. Order 66 might have been prevented, the Jedi Order might have survived, Palpatine's rise might have been disrupted. Canon never provides definitive answers to those possibilities. They remain among the great unanswered questions of the saga. What is clear is that Fives saw the truth when almost no one else did. He recognized that the clone army carried a secret buried deep within its own biology. As starships continued crossing the galaxy and battles raged on worlds such as Anaxes, Megiddo, and Felucia, the Republic remained unaware of how close it had come to uncovering its own destruction. Millions of clone troopers fought with courage and loyalty. Jedi generals continued leading campaigns. Citizens believed the war was moving toward a conclusion, yet hidden beneath armor, beneath training, beneath years of friendship and sacrifice, a dormant command still waited. Silent, invisible, patient. And with every passing day, the moment when it would finally awaken drew closer. How much of Order 66 was programming and how much was tragedy? Few moments in Star Wars history are as devastating as the destruction of the Jedi Order. Entire generations of viewers remember the shock of watching clone troopers turn against commanders they had fought beside for years. Yet the closer you examine the event, the more complicated it becomes. These were not strangers killing strangers. These were soldiers betraying friends. They were brothers in arms suddenly transformed into executioners by a command hidden inside them since birth. By 19 BBY, the Clone Wars had entered their final phase. After years of conflict, the Republic appeared to be gaining momentum. Major separatist leaders were under increasing pressure. Republic forces launched offensives across numerous sectors. Jedi generals continued directing campaigns from the front lines. To many citizens, victory seemed closer than ever before. Few understood that the war had always been moving toward a completely different objective. Darth Sidious had never intended merely to defeat the Separatists. He intended to destroy the Jedi and replace the Republic itself. The final chain of events began with Chancellor Palpatine's growing influence over Anakin Skywalker. Throughout the war, Palpatine positioned himself as mentor, advisor, and trusted friend. At the same time, he carefully isolated Anakin from other sources of guidance. Fear played a crucial role. Anakin feared losing Padme Amidala. He feared death. He feared failure. Palpatine exploited those fears with extraordinary patience. By the time the truth emerged, Anakin stood at the center of a decision that would alter galactic history. When Jedi Master Mace Windu confronted Palpatine in his office on Coruscant, the Sith Lord finally revealed himself openly. The The confrontation ended with Windu's death and Anakin's fall to the dark side. At that moment, Palpatine granted him a new identity, Darth Vader. Simultaneously, the final stage of the long-prepared plan began. The Clone Wars were ending. The Jedi Order was about to be destroyed. The hidden purpose of the clone army would finally be activated. The command itself was remarkably simple. Execute Order 66. Across the galaxy, clone commanders received the transmission through military communication channels. The words traveled from Coruscant to battlefields separated by thousands of light years. On Utapau, Commander Cody received the order, while Obi-Wan Kenobi pursued General Grievous. On Megiddo, clone forces turned against Jedi Master Ki-Adi-Mundi. On Felucia, Aayla Secura suddenly found herself under fire from soldiers she trusted. On Kashyyyk, Yoda sensed a disturbance through the Force moments before clones attempted to kill him. The command spread with terrifying speed. Years of preparation unfolded within minutes. What makes these scenes so painful is the history behind them. Commander Cody had fought beside Obi-Wan throughout countless campaigns. They shared victories, hardships, and mutual respect. Shortly before Order 66, Cody had even returned Obi-Wan's lightsaber after the Jedi misplaced it during combat. Their relationship reflected genuine trust. Yet when the order arrived, Cody immediately commanded artillery units to fire upon Obi-Wan's position. The transformation appeared instantaneous. Friendship vanished, duty replaced it. The inhibitor chip had activated. The fate of Aayla Secura on Felucia illustrates the same tragedy. Surrounded by clone troopers who had followed her through dangerous battles, she walked peacefully through a jungle landscape moments before the command arrived. Then blaster fire erupted behind her. The soldiers continued firing even after she fell. The scene is brief, yet it captures the horrifying efficiency of the plan. Palpatine did not merely arrange military victory, he engineered betrayal on a galactic scale. Why did some clones seem more conflicted than others? Canon suggests that the chips enforced obedience but did not completely erase personality. Different clones responded in different ways. Some executed the command immediately and without visible hesitation. Others appeared distressed. Some retained fragments of emotional awareness even while carrying out the order. The programming was powerful, but it acted upon minds that had developed unique identities over years of experience. This tension between control and individuality remains one of the most haunting aspects of clone history. No story illustrates that tension better than Captain Rex's. During the Siege of Mandalore, one of the final campaigns of the Clone Wars, Rex served alongside Ahsoka Tano. Although Ahsoka had left the Jedi Order, she remained one of Rex's closest friends. Together, they pursued Darth Maul on Mandalore while galactic events accelerated elsewhere. Then Order 66 arrived. For a brief moment, Rex resisted. He struggled against the command long enough to warn Ahsoka indirectly. Tears formed in his eyes as he fought for control of his own actions. The scene reveals that beneath the programming, the man Rex had become still existed. Ahsoka eventually discovered the truth about the inhibitor chips. With assistance from droids aboard a Republic cruiser, she removed Rex's chip through surgery. The procedure freed him from the command's influence. Their escape became one of the few stories of successful resistance during the initial execution of Order 66. While thousands of Jedi died across the galaxy, Rex regained his autonomy. Yet survival came at a terrible cost. He was forced to witness fellow clones acting under the same control he had narrowly escaped. Meanwhile, Darth Vader led another crucial operation. Formerly Anakin Skywalker, he marched at the head of the 501st Legion during the assault on the Jedi Temple. The same clone unit that had fought beside him throughout the war now followed him into one of the darkest missions in galactic history. Together they attacked the very institution they had defended for years. Temple guards fell. Jedi Knights were overwhelmed. Archives burned. Centuries of knowledge vanished in a single night. The destruction symbolized the end of one era and the birth of another. The Jedi Order did not disappear completely. Survivors remained. Obi-Wan Kenobi escaped Utapau. Yoda survived Kashyyyk. Ahsoka remained hidden. Others endured in scattered corners of the galaxy. Yet the Order ceased to exist as the institution that had guided the Republic for generations. Palpatine achieved precisely what he intended. The Guardians of Peace were branded traitors. Their defenders became their executioners. The clone army completed the mission for which it had secretly been created. And then almost immediately, the soldiers who carried out that mission faced a new reality. The Republic they had served throughout the war no longer existed. Senate chambers still stood on Coruscant. Star destroyers still patrolled hyperspace routes. Clone legions still occupied military bases. But everything had changed. The war was over. The Jedi were gone. A new empire was rising, and the army that had won the conflict was about to discover that its usefulness to Emperor Palpatine had already begun to fade. If the clones won the war, why were they discarded almost immediately afterward? At first glance, the question makes little sense. The clone army had delivered victory. It had defeated the Separatists. It had carried out Order 66. It had helped secure Emperor Palpatine's control over the galaxy. Logic suggests that such a force would become the foundation of the new imperial military. Yet within only a few years of the Republic's fall, the Empire began replacing clone troopers with ordinary recruits. The soldiers who built the Empire discovered that they were no longer essential to it. The transition began almost immediately after the declaration of the Galactic Empire in 19 BBY. Standing before the Senate, Palpatine announced that the Republic would be reorganized into a new political order designed to provide security and stability. Applause echoed through the chamber. Many senators welcomed the change. Others remained silent. Across the galaxy, clone forces continued carrying out military operations under new banners and new symbols. The familiar crest of the Republic gradually disappeared, replaced by imperial insignia. The uniforms changed, the rhetoric changed, the mission changed. For many clone troopers, however, daily life initially appeared similar. Garrisons remained active, patrols continued, military installations required protection, remaining separatist holdouts still resisted imperial authority. Clone units were deployed to maintain order throughout newly conquered territories. The difference lay not in what they were doing, but in what they were serving. The Republic had presented itself as a democracy. The Empire openly centralized power around one ruler. Some clones accepted this transition without question. Others quietly sensed that something fundamental had shifted. The animated series, The Bad Batch, provides one of the clearest windows into this period. Clone Force 99, commonly known as the Bad Batch, consisted of genetically enhanced clones whose mutations gave them unusual abilities. Hunter possessed heightened sensory perception. Tech displayed extraordinary intelligence. Wrecker possessed immense strength. Crosshair demonstrated exceptional marksmanship. Echo, once a member of Domino Squad, eventually joined their ranks after surviving severe injuries during the war. Together, they witnessed the Empire's transformation from the perspective of soldiers who no longer fit comfortably within the new system. Why did the Empire lose faith in cloning? Cost played a major role. Cloning was expensive. Kamino's facilities required enormous resources. Troopers took years to produce, even with accelerated aging. Recruited soldiers offered a cheaper alternative. The Empire also preferred citizens who actively chose service. A volunteer stormtrooper could be shaped through propaganda, ideology, and loyalty to the regime. Clones remained tied to an older era. They were products of the Republic, not creations of the Empire's future. Another issue concerned aging. The accelerated growth process that made the clone army possible also created long-term limitations. Clones aged at roughly twice the normal human rate. A soldier who appeared physically 30 years old might chronologically be much younger. This characteristic proved useful during wartime because it produced combat-ready troops quickly. During peacetime, however, it created a logistical challenge. The Empire sought a military designed for permanence. Rapid aging meant clones required replacement sooner than conventional recruits. The figure most closely associated with this transition is Vice Admiral Rampart. Operating within the Imperial command structure, Rampart became a strong advocate for replacing clone forces. Throughout the Bad Batch, he repeatedly promoted policies favoring recruited soldiers over cloned troops. To him, clones represented an outdated system. Their loyalty had helped build the Empire, but their continued existence no longer aligned with Imperial priorities. Rampart's vision reflected a broader shift occurring at the highest levels of government. The Empire was not interested in honoring past service. It was interested in efficiency and control. One of the most important initiatives of this period was Project War Mantle. Unlike the Grand Army of the Republic, which relied heavily on cloning, War Mantle focused on training enlisted recruits. These soldiers would eventually evolve into the Stormtrooper Corps, familiar from the original trilogy. The project represented far more than a simple personnel change. It signaled a transformation in Imperial philosophy. The Republic had depended on a specialized army created in secret. The Empire sought a military presence woven throughout society itself. Citizens would become soldiers. Soldiers would become agents of Imperial authority. How did the clones react when they realized they were being replaced? The answer varied widely. Some accepted their fate and continued serving. Others became disillusioned. Many struggled to understand why years of sacrifice seemed to matter so little. They had fought on Christophsis, Umbara, Ryloth, Geonosis, and countless other worlds. They had survived battles that reshaped the galaxy. Now younger recruits with no wartime experience began taking their positions. The transition felt less like retirement and more like abandonment. Commander Cody's story offers a particularly revealing example. After Order 66, Cody remained in Imperial service. Yet the Bad Batch eventually shows him becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the Empire's methods. Missions that once focused on defeating enemy armies evolved into occupations and political suppression. Cody witnessed civilians suffering under Imperial rule. He observed growing differences between the values he once believed he served and the realities of the new regime. Eventually, he disappeared from active service. His fate remains partially unexplored in current canon, but his departure speaks volumes about the moral uncertainty facing many veterans. Meanwhile, other clones began questioning their future more openly. Echo chose a path of resistance, helping clones escape Imperial control. Rex, who had already removed his inhibitor chip, worked quietly to build networks supporting former troopers. Across the galaxy, small groups of clones attempted to adapt to lives for which they had never been prepared. This challenge was immense. The Republic created them for war. The Empire no longer wanted them, yet no one had ever taught them how to be anything else. Why did Palpatine allow the clone army to fade away when it had served him so effectively? One answer lies in the nature of his rule. Palpatine valued usefulness above loyalty. Once a tool fulfilled its purpose, he moved on to the next one. The Separatists were discarded. The Senate would eventually be discarded. The clone army was no different. Its purpose had never been to endure forever. It existed to win a war, destroy the Jedi, and help create an empire. Those objectives had been achieved. Far away from Coruscant, another decision was quietly approaching. The ocean world of Kamino still stood. Its cloning facilities continued operating. Its cities still rose above endless storms. Yet from the Imperial perspective, Kamino represented a reminder of the past. The world contained evidence of how the clone army had been created. It housed technology the Empire no longer wished to rely upon. And within its towering structures lived the last architects of the greatest military project in galactic history. Soon, the Empire would decide what to do with them. The answer would bring an end not only to the clone army's future, but to its birthplace as well. Was the destruction of Kamino meant to erase evidence of Palpatine's greatest deception? The question becomes difficult to avoid when examining the final fate of the clone army's birthplace. Kamino was more than a manufacturing center. It was where the secret army had been created. It was where the inhibitor chip program originated. It was where the Republic's future had quietly been engineered beneath endless storms. As long as Kamino existed, physical proof of the conspiracy survived. And in the Imperial era, evidence was something Emperor Palpatine preferred to control. For years, Tipoca City had stood above the oceans, like a monument to scientific achievement. The Kaminoans mastered technologies that few civilizations could approach. Millions of clones emerged from their facilities. Entire military campaigns became possible because of their work, yet by the time the Empire established itself, Kamino's value had changed dramatically. The cloning infrastructure that once represented the future now represented a costly reminder of the past. Imperial planners increasingly viewed the world as expendable. The process did not happen overnight. Initially, Kamino continued operating under Imperial supervision. Remaining clone production programs persisted. Existing military contracts were honored. Clone cadets still trained in facilities where generations of soldiers had prepared before them. Yet the atmosphere had changed. Imperial officers replaced Republic representatives. Trust diminished. Surveillance increased. the relationship between the Empire and the Kaminoans became increasingly strained. Both sides understood that the future was uncertain. The events depicted in The Bad Batch reveal this tension in remarkable detail. Prime Minister Lama Su recognized the danger facing Kamino. He understood that the Empire no longer depended on large-scale clone production. In response, he attempted to preserve Kaminoan relevance by proposing advanced cloning initiatives. His goal was simple: make Kamino indispensable once again. But the Empire's priorities had already shifted. Military leaders sought recruits, not expensive genetic programs. Loyalty could be manufactured through ideology as easily as through biology. Why didn't the Empire simply continue using clones and recruits simultaneously? From a practical perspective, that solution seems reasonable, yet Palpatine rarely tolerated institutions that existed beyond his direct control. Kamino possessed specialized knowledge unavailable elsewhere. Its scientists understood secrets the Empire might prefer hidden. Its cities represented an independent center of expertise. Over time, this became a liability rather than an asset. The Empire valued obedience. Kamino valued its own survival. Those goals eventually collided. The turning point arrived when Imperial leadership decided the transition away from cloning was complete. Project War Mantle advanced steadily. Stormtrooper recruitment expanded. New training facilities appeared throughout the galaxy. Clone numbers continued shrinking through attrition and accelerated aging. The Empire no longer needed Kamino in the way the Republic once had. And when authoritarian governments decide they no longer need something, sentiment rarely enters the calculation. The destruction itself remains one of the most haunting moments in modern Star Wars canon. Imperial Venator class. Star destroyers entered position above Kamino. These were vessels once associated with Republic victory, ships that clone crews had operated throughout the Clone Wars. Now they served a different purpose. Orders were issued. Turbo lasers opened fire. Massive energy blasts struck Tipoca City. Explosions rippled through structures that had stood for decades. Towers collapsed into the ocean. Walkways shattered. Laboratories vanished beneath waves. The birthplace of the clone army disappeared beneath the same waters that had surrounded it since the beginning. The symbolism is impossible to miss. The Republic's own warships destroyed the world that had created the Republic's soldiers. Clones watched their home vanish. Some escaped, others did not. Buildings that contained childhood memories, training halls, barracks, and laboratories sank beneath the ocean floor. Entire chapters of galactic history disappeared within hours. Kamino's destruction was not merely strategic. It was historical erasure. A chapter of the past was being buried. For surviving clones, the loss carried profound emotional weight. Most citizens of the galaxy never considered Kamino home. To the clones, however, it was the only birthplace they had ever known. They remembered the storms. They remembered the white corridors. They remembered training exercises beneath artificial lights. Kamino represented childhood, identity, and origin. Watching it disappear forced many veterans to confront a painful reality. The Republic was gone, the Jedi were gone, and now even their home had vanished. Meanwhile, former clone commanders faced increasingly uncertain futures. Rex continued building networks to assist displaced clones. Echo dedicated himself to helping former soldiers escape Imperial control. Other veterans struggled to adapt. Many lacked families. Most possessed no civilian career experience. Their entire lives had revolved around military service. The galaxy they helped create offered surprisingly little place for them within it. The irony was bitter. They had secured Imperial victory, yet the Empire treated them as obsolete equipment. How do soldiers built for war learn to live in peace? The question haunted countless clones during these years. Some found temporary work as security personnel. Others disappeared into remote settlements. A few remained loyal to Imperial service despite growing doubts. Each path reflected the same challenge. Clones had never been allowed to choose their destiny. Kamino decided their childhood. The Republic decided their purpose. The Empire decided their replacement. For perhaps the first time, many were being forced to decide their own future. Among the most important figures navigating this transition was Captain Rex. Freed from his inhibitor chip and increasingly aware of the Empire's true nature, Rex emerged as a protector of former clone troopers. His efforts were not dramatic in the way major battles were dramatic. He was not commanding fleets or overthrowing governments. Instead, he helped individuals survive. He preserved lives that Imperial planners considered disposable. In doing so, he preserved something even more important: memory. Because memory became the final battlefield. The Empire could destroy Kamino. It could dismantle cloning facilities. It could replace clone units with stormtroopers. It could bury evidence beneath oceans. Yet it could not completely erase the experiences of the soldiers who had lived through those events. Rex remembered, Echo remembered, countless veterans remembered. And years later, on a remote world called Selos, several of those survivors would gather together beneath open skies, carrying with them the last living connection to an army that had once changed the fate of the galaxy. What does it mean to survive when the nation you fought for never truly existed? For the last generation of clone troopers, this question became deeply personal. The Republic they defended had transformed into an empire. The Jedi they followed had been declared traitors. Their homeworld had been destroyed. Their army had been dismantled. Yet some clones endured long enough to see another age emerge. They lived through the fall of one government, the rise of another, and eventually the birth of a rebellion that challenged everything they had once helped create. Their story did not end with the Clone Wars. In many ways, it only became more poignant afterward. Years after Order 66, Captain Rex remained one of the most important surviving clones in the galaxy. Freed from his inhibitor chip and committed to opposing Imperial tyranny, he gradually became involved in early resistance efforts. By the time of the events of Star Wars Rebels, roughly 5 years before the Battle of Yavin, Rex had settled on the remote world of Selos alongside Commander Wolf and clone Commando Gregor. The three veterans lived inside a modified ATTE walker, fishing in a harsh desert landscape, far removed from the battlefields of their youth. They had become old men long before their chronological age would suggest. Accelerated aging continued to shape their lives. The reunion between Rex and members of the growing rebel movement remains one of the most moving moments in clone history. When Ezra Bridger, Kanan Jarrus, and the crew of the Ghost encountered the veterans, old wounds quickly resurfaced. Kanan, who had survived Order 66 as a child Padawan named Caleb Doom, struggled to trust any clone trooper, His suspicion was understandable. For many Jedi survivors, clone armor became forever associated with betrayal and loss. Rex therefore faced a challenge larger than any battlefield objective. He had to prove that he was more than the programming once forced upon him. Commander Wolffe embodied a different side of the clone experience. During the Clone Wars, he served under Jedi Master Plo Koon and commanded the Wolf Pack. His loyalty to Plo Koon was genuine, and like many clones, he carried emotional scars from Order 66. Years later, fear still influenced his decisions. When the rebels arrived on Selos, Wolffe initially contacted the Empire because he worried their presence would bring danger to his fellow veterans. His actions reflected the lasting trauma experienced by many clones. Survival had not erased the past. It had merely forced them to live with it. Gregor's story was perhaps even more unusual. Introduced in the Clone Wars and expanded in Rebels, Gregor survived experiences that should have killed him several times over. Explosions, injuries, and years of warfare left visible marks on his mind and body. Yet beneath his eccentric behavior remained extraordinary courage. When the Empire threatened those around him, Gregor still chose to fight. Even after everything he had endured, the instinct to protect others remained stronger than the instinct for self-preservation. That quality connected him to countless other clone veterans scattered throughout the galaxy. Why did so many clones ultimately side with rebellion rather than empire? The answer lies partly in what they witnessed. Clone troopers had spent years fighting beside Jedi who protected civilians and defended worlds under attack. The Empire increasingly demanded different behavior. Occupation replaced liberation. Fear replaced cooperation. Military power became a tool for maintaining political control. Clones who retained their independence could see the difference. The ideals they believed they served during the Clone Wars often conflicted sharply with Imperial reality. Meanwhile, former members of Clone Force 99 continued influencing events from the shadows. The Bad Batch explored what happened to soldiers who refused to fit neatly into Imperial structures. Hunter, Wrecker, Echo, and their allies repeatedly risked their lives to protect vulnerable individuals from Imperial exploitation. Their stories emphasized a recurring truth about clone history. The closer clones moved away from the programming and institutions that created them, the more clearly their humanity emerged. They became fathers, mentors, protectors, and friends, rather than simply soldiers. As decades passed, the galaxy itself changed. The Death Star was constructed and later destroyed. The Rebel Alliance grew stronger. Battles erupted across worlds far removed from the Clone Wars. Younger generations knew little about Kamino or the Republic Army. Stormtroopers became the dominant symbol of Imperial power. To many citizens, clone troopers seemed like relics of a distant age. Yet beneath the surface, their influence remained everywhere. Imperial military doctrine evolved from systems developed during the Clone Wars. Veterans carried lessons learned in battles that younger officers had never experienced. One fascinating detail from modern canon reference material places Rex at the Battle of Endor in 4 ABY. While older fan theories once speculated that the elderly rebel soldier Nick Sant might secretly be Rex, current canon takes a different approach. Rex is confirmed to have fought during the campaign against the second Death Star, but he remains his own character rather than being identified as Nick Sant. the image is powerful regardless. A soldier created before the Clone Wars may have stood among the forces that helped end the Empire he unintentionally helped build decades earlier. What then is the true legacy of the clone army? At first glance, the answer seems straightforward. They won battles. They defeated the Separatists. They carried out Order 66. They helped establish the Empire. Yet none of those statements fully captures their significance. The clone troopers became one of the clearest explorations of identity in Star Wars. They were designed for a single purpose and spent their lives discovering they were more than that purpose. Again and again, individuals emerged from a system built to suppress the individuality. Their legacy also survives through the people they influenced. Rex shaped the lives of rebels. Echo inspired others to resist Imperial control. Countless unnamed clones demonstrated loyalty, courage, and sacrifice across hundreds of battlefields. Even those who never escaped the influence of the inhibitor chips remained tragic figures rather than villains. They were manipulated from birth by forces beyond their understanding. The greatest crime of the clone conspiracy was not merely the destruction it caused. It was the theft of choice from millions of living beings. And so the history of the clone army ends where it quietly began, with soldiers looking toward a future they did not choose. Long after Camino sank beneath the waves, long after Venator-class warships vanished from service, long after the Republic and Empire became subjects for historians, the memory endured. Somewhere in the galaxy, an aging veteran could still remember the sound of rain striking the towers of Tipoca City. He could remember white corridors stretching into the distance. He could remember brothers whose faces matched his own. And in those memories lived the final truth of the clone army. Not a story about weapons or warfare, but a story about millions of men who spent their lives proving they were far more than copies. When you step back from the battles, the starships, the politics, and the famous names, the history of the clone army becomes a story about choice. That is what gives it such a unique place in the Star Wars saga. The clones were created in a laboratory, assigned a purpose before birth, and pushed toward a future that others designed for them. No one asked what they wanted. No one invited them to choose their own path. Yet throughout the Clone Wars, again and again, they found ways to become individuals. They gave themselves names. They formed friendships. They developed loyalties that could not be measured in genetic codes or military records. That is why their tragedy reaches beyond the fall of the Republic. The clones were never merely victims of war. They were victims of a system that viewed living beings as tools. The Kaminoans saw products. Palpatine saw instruments. Military planners saw assets. Yet the truth that emerges from every major clone story is that life refuses to remain confined within such definitions. Rex became more than a captain. Fives became more than a trooper. Echo became more than a soldier. Even unnamed clones who appeared only briefly carried the same quiet message. Identity is not granted by those who create you. It is discovered through the choices you make. There is another reason their story matters so deeply to the larger saga. The clone army reveals the true nature of Palpatine's evil more clearly than almost any superweapon ever could. The Death Star destroyed planets. Order 66 destroyed the Jedi, but the clone conspiracy reached even deeper. It transformed loyalty into a weapon. It turned friendship into a trap. It took honorable men and used them against the people they respected most. The Sith often seek power through fear and domination, yet here, their greatest victory came through manipulation. The clones remind you that tyranny is most dangerous when it convinces good people they are serving a good cause. And yet Star Wars has always insisted that fate is not the final authority. That idea runs through the story of Anakin Skywalker, through Luke Skywalker's faith in redemption, through the survival of the Jedi, and through the lives of the clones themselves. The chips existed. The programming was real. The conspiracy succeeded. But even then, sparks of choice survived. Rex resisted. Wolf eventually found his own path. Echo chose to fight for others. The Empire could control armies and governments, yet it could never completely extinguish the individual spirit that emerged inside the clones. That stubborn persistence of identity feels almost like a quiet echo of the Force itself, moving beneath events in ways that rulers cannot fully control. Perhaps that is why the clone troopers remain so memorable long after the battles have ended. Their victories and defeats matter, but their humanity matters more. They entered the galaxy as copies and left it as individuals. They were born sharing the same face. Yet by the end of their journey, no two stories felt exactly alike. Some died heroes. Some lived long enough to witness the Empire's fall. Some never escaped the consequences of Order 66. Together they became one of the clearest reminders that a person's worth cannot be measured by origin, design, or expectation. And so, as this story settles into silence, you find yourself back where it began. The storm still rolls across Kamino's endless ocean. Lightning briefly illuminates the towers of Tipoca City. Rain taps softly against transparent steel windows high above the waves. Deep within glowing chambers, rows of clone children drift peacefully inside their cylinders, unaware of the wars they will fight, the friendships they will forge, and the choices they will struggle to make. For a moment before history reaches them, before destiny closes its hand, there is only the distant sound of the sea and the quiet rhythm of rain falling through the darkness.